Imagine landing a job, only to be escorted out before lunch. I found a Reddit thread with first day stories that are absolutely unhinged and jaw-dropping. We're looking at people who got fired before they even started. Like and subscribe to the channel, and let's get into it. I applied for a public safety position at a municipality, legit medium-sized town of about 50,000 people, and got called in for an interview. I show up to be informed that this is a 3-part interview. First with HR, then a physical agility test, then a panel interview, which includes the mayor, city manager, and medical director. Mind you, I was never told about this process. It isn't in the job posting, and I'm in a goddamn suit. I do the HR part, then go to the pat. Look like fucking Rich Eisen running a 40-yard dash, only doing an entire pat, and show up decently sweaty at this panel interview. Fairly certain there is no way I'm getting hired for this job. I proceed through the interview. They ask some completely generic questions. I can understand some with a few job-specific questions mixed in. But no, this is all, if you were walking in the woods, what animal would you see questions. Then one of them stops the interview and says, "We've heard enough. Can you come in tomorrow, day after, skip Thursday, and come in Friday? That'll be your orientation." I said, I didn't know I'd be working here tomorrow. I still need to give my other job a 2 weeks notice. Also, am I being offered the job? What's the compensation package? The mayor responds, "You work here now, and you need to make us a priority. We can discuss pay after your orientation is over." What the heck? I said I still need to give notice to my current job, to which he proceeded to tell me not to bother. We wouldn't be a good fit, and to turn in any equipment and uniforms. What equipment? What uniform? So I'm not sure if it was fired, quit, or never hired, but they sent me a check for 8 hours, so I think my story qualifies. Next story. Went to work for a big software company in the UK. No names mentioned. I went to the agency who were doing their hiring. It was very professional, very thorough. Agency knew their crap. Wanted someone who could support their customers, hosted environment, call desk. No issue there. I knew the processes, got the job, went to the building, all smartly dressed for my first day, and the key card I was given for the front door didn't work. Okay, no biggie. Bet it happens all the time. Tried it again, and then again. No joy. Tried the door. Didn't budge. Receptionist looked at me like, awkward. What the hell? She comes to the door and says in that awful drone voice that some receptionists have, "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine. I'm the new guy. My key card doesn't work." "Oh, I don't have any appointments for new starters today." "Oh, this is company name HQ, right?" "Yes." "What's your name?" "I'll check you against the DB. Come in and take a seat." "Thanks. Sorry, I don't want to be rude, but my shift is supposed to start in 20 minutes. Is there a manager that can verify who I am?" "One moment, please." So she sits there on the PC for 2 minutes while I am sitting at the reception desk looking like a lost person. Finally, she speaks up. "Manager will be here shortly." "Okay, great." 2 minutes later, big, tall South African guy turns up and says, without a pause, "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Airwalker Drum and Bass Music." "The new guy for the hosted support desk?" "Oh crap. Fucking agency cocked up." "Sorry. Filled the position." "Sorry?" "Yeah, you were supposed to start on Monday, but the agency probably didn't tell you, did they?" "Happens all the time. Look, wait here. I'll see if there's something we can do for your travel, etc." So, like a mug, I am sat there in reception, being told there was no job for me after handing in my notice at my old job. Manager comes back. "Can you do SQL and second line support?" "Yup." "Okay, come back at 5 p.m. and we'll start you on the out of hours desk. Same salary, Monday to Thursday, 5 p.m. to 12 p.m. So you want the job or not?" "No, Mr. Afrikaans chap, I don't, but I'll take it because money and not being homeless is better." So I came back at 4:45 p.m., ready to do some work, freshly showered and with a hearty meal in my belly. Keycard didn't work still. No receptionist. I tried the door. It wouldn't budge again. Sigh. This is going well. A window pops open upstairs. Afrikaans guy. "I'm so sorry, mate. We can't hire you. We had a guy lined up and he didn't turn up, but now he's here and he's got more experience. I am so sorry. We couldn't reach you earlier, my friend. Please, can you give our HQ a call in the morning and we will get you some travel expenses?" I'm stood there, in the cold, having been fired, hired then fired again without starting a job. I just marched off into the gloom, furious, and phoned the agency right away. The guy was horrified when I told him what had happened. He kept apologizing, but I asked him, "What are you going to do about this then? I've resigned from my old job and I can't go back. They've replaced me." "Well, we have this position in hospitality, £14,000, 6 p.m. to 3 a.m., working weekends. Go fuck yourself." The end. Next story. Hired by a Michelin star restaurant for my first ever job. They expected to take me on and train me up on the job and pay less for me than already trained staff. But when a member of staff didn't turn up, I had to attempt silver service with no knowledge. Obviously, I failed, so I ended up polishing cutlery with the owner of the restaurant. We got talking. He said he saw potential in me to do better things in my life, and just said that I should never follow his footsteps and put my passion for food ahead of my other passions/interests, as it will ruin my life. Later, he talked to the manager at the time, told me I could use them as a reference for future jobs, and I was given a week's rather than a day's pay. Next story. Hired by a chain store. First day of work, still in the back office filling out paperwork, dealing with HR. Manager says to me, "I sent in the automated personality test and corporate says I can't hire you. I'm sorry. They did pay me for 1/2 a day though." Next story. I just got hired at Sonic Drive-In. They had secret customers come in fairly regularly who order and eat the food, then judge the employees and restaurant on how well they handled company policies and stuff. Well, the current employees have been getting horrible grades lately. Like the highest in the last 2 months was 68 over 100. The owner walks in and says the next person who gets below a 90 is fired. So on my very first day, they put me on drive-thru, which was a nightmare. And sure enough, I find out later that a secret customer rolled up. Owner comes back in at the end of my shift 8 hours later. "Who was working driving through today? You got an 88. You're fired." And then left. So that's how I got fired for being the best employee there on my first day. Next story. I wonder if this counts. I once got hired by a magazine to do some translation work. It was a freelance gig, so we didn't even do any official paperwork beforehand or anything. When I arrived, they said, "Oh, so sorry. We already had someone come in and do the translation." I was livid. I asked why I wasn't notified. They had no answer and essentially fired me on my first day. About 6 months later, I'm working somewhere else, and I get an email from the same local magazine asking me if I'd like to come in and translate some stuff for them. I was in a bad mood, so I went totally out of character and went off on them via email, but in a professional tone. I basically said, "I do not respect you or your boss for treating me this way. Please do not offer any work to me or ever contact me again." 2 days later, I get an email from them telling me that I've been fired for insubordination. Next story. First job at 14 as a busboy. Shown 500 things in the kitchen and thinking I would have to remember them all. Shows me how to be a host on top of all this. I say, "Can I do that tomorrow instead?" As I wanted to focus on learning what they showed me already. 10 minutes later, I'm called into the office, handed $20, and told I'm not what they are looking for. Was a good life lesson. Next story. Got hired for a warehouse position, probably 15 years ago. Was 10 minutes late my first day because I lived 45 minutes away and the main highway got shut down due to a multi-car wreck. Called the boss and told him. He said no worries. Got to the job and was fired for being late. Next story. Not fired, but I showed up for what I thought was my first day and a title. Was then told, no, I wasn't hired for that job, but for another one that I didn't apply for and for less money. I was thinking about my options when I went to break room to grab a cup of coffee. While pushing the lid down, the cup compressed, covering me and my white shirt and khakis. I went into HR and told them that it wasn't working out, and I was taking this as a sign. Gave them a piece of my mind about their hiring practices and shitty communication, and bounced. Got a call from them on Friday, asking if I wanted the job I thought I already had. Next story. Technically, second day, since day one was my interview, and I did some training. I have a sleeping disorder that was at the time undiagnosed. This is important. I was to be there clocked in at 7 a.m. at a box factory, which felt like a conspiracy during training. Like we were just moving money around from cardboard folder to cardboard folder in a big circle. Giant slabs of cardboard came to us inside of huge boxes, which we then shaped into boxes and filled with slabs of cardboard and shipped out. I felt like the chain probably kept going infinitely until our same cardboard looped back around to us. Regardless, I was to punch in at 7 a.m. to join the circle of box life, and I woke up staring at a clock, reading 11 a.m., and panicked. I immediately called my boss on a sincere, "I am so sorry, I don't know how I overslept," even though I'd lost jobs over it before, just never on day one. "And I can be there in 15 minutes. Are you fucking kidding me? Is this a fucking joke? Quit wasting my time." Click. I groggily stumble the fuck out into the living room, where my housemates are playing Guitar Hero. And I'm kind of in a state of shock, because while I get 4 hours is an absurd amount of oversleeping, I've never been shouted at like that before. I start explaining that to them, when it dawns on me. One of my buddies, who is currently trying to best his reigning blood score, should be at school right now. He has class on Tuesdays. "Trevor, you skipping today?" He looks at me and just reminds me his schedule. "Tuesdays and Thursdays." "Yeah, dude, it's Tuesday." "It's Wednesday, dude." I had slept from about 10 p.m. Monday night until 11 a.m. Wednesday. Now I'm on an anti-seizure drug and can live without being terrified of whether or not I'm going to be able to wake up the following day. But that is the only time I got fired on the first day. I lost a lot of jobs I didn't like over that crap. Next story. One of my nannies, when I was a little girl, was fired the first day of work. She asked my mother if she could go to her house for crayons. And since she lived a few blocks away of our house, Mom said okay. 1 hour passed, and she did not came back. So Mom went to the house of the nanny and saw her drinking tea with her mother. She did not even bother to apologize. Mom told her to never come back. But the nanny did not understand what she did wrong. So she came back next day and sat in front of our door. Mom told her to leave, and she never came back. Next story. Was the second or third day, but first day working with the boss. At the end of the day, the shared till comes up short a little over $5. I know the exact transaction too. He was slow on the register, so I left it beside the till. It went into his pocket. He tells me I have to make up the difference out of pocket. I politely refuse and inform him that's not permitted by the Employment Standards Act. He blows a gasket, and I leave with him yelling at me. He was fined $250. The sad thing is, the woman who'd worked for him for 5+ years had been starting her shift by putting money in the till to cover any errors. She'd probably put in more than $1,300 while working for this jerk. Next story. My time to shine. I got fired while signing my contract to start my first day's work. I wanted to make a good impression in the job and tried to banter with a lady in HR. Being the funny and engaging man that I am, I called her a dirty slag in an effort to forge a good relationship. In retrospect, I think I got a bit too familiar too quickly. Cue contract in bin and me being marched off premises 2 minutes later. From time to time, I wonder exactly where I went wrong on that one. But if I had to pin it on anything, it would probably be calling her a dirty slag. Edit. Bit more content, for those who want it. This probably won't help my case. I hadn't actually spoken to her yet. She'd been a bit quiet, and I wanted to be the guy that got everyone involved in the conversation. I whispered it under my breath into her ear when we were next to each other. Imagine how one might whisper, "I love you," in the ear of their wife before you fall asleep. I did the same to a woman I'd never met with the words, "You dirty slag." Next story. I was young, naive. I interviewed for an inside sales job. Got the job. Turned up on the first day, ready to get to work. The manager told me the first 2 weeks was unpaid training. I confirmed this was not a joke or a prank played on the new guy. The manager stood by his word. I called him a piece of crap for making weight money on work clothes and turning down a real job with another company. I threw a stapler at a computer monitor. It shattered. He fired me. Like I wasn't 3 seconds from quitting. Sorry, motherfuckers. We'd already negotiated my pay prior to day one. No mention of 80 hours worth of my free labor. Next story. Didn't get fired, but I always think I should have been. I was an IT apprentice, and clocking off time was 5:30. At roughly 5:20, the more experienced IT guy I was with started to watch films and set up his machine to copy a DVD. Back then it took all night to break the CSS encryption, so he'd leave it running. As I'm watching this film, a lady walks in and says hi, and asks if this is what we should be doing. I explain and say, "Hey, it's almost home time anyway, no problem." Turns out the lady is the owner of the business. Oops. Second story, where I didn't get fired but could/should have. I'm a bit older, first day at another more important job. I couldn't find a car parking space, but someone had parked in a weird way, blocking off 3 other spaces. I walk in and moan quite loudly to my friend about some knobhead who has parked their car like that. Turns out it was a department head, who was stood behind me. Didn't get fired, was there for 10+ years, but it was mentioned in my leaving speech. Next story. I used to work at a warehouse that had a lot of temps and had a guy disappear after lunch on his first day. After asking around, I learned that he was riding circles around the island at the entrance to the industrial park, about a 12-foot loop, and the cops happened to ride by. They pulled him over and arrested him for what my manager claimed as being high as a kite, but he said he had lost his wallet and was just looking around for it. Place was kind of filled to the brim with people on something, from weed to cocaine. Even had a guy who would come in every day with a big water bottle filled with just orange juice. Next story. I got a job as a waiter at a supposedly new upscale restaurant. My first day was the day that they opened. We had to be there at 8 a.m. in order to get everything ready for the grand opening. I didn't know that scrubbing floors on my hands and knees was a part of my job description as a waiter, but I did it anyways in my brand new perfectly clean uniform. By the time 3:30 p.m. rolled around, none of us had gotten any breaks. So I asked my boss if I could take a lunch break. He said, "Yeah, I'll give you a break. You're fired." As far as I know, the only thing that I did wrong was asking for a break. When I went back at the end of the week to pick up my whopping $20 check, most of the wait staff that I worked with was there too. It turns out that the boss fired a few more people, and the majority of the rest quit. The place went through several changes in management before it shut down about 2 years later. The parking lot was never very full, even during peak hours. Next story. I started a job as a student mechanic at my university. Paid like crap, $9 per hour I believe, but it would help pay the bills and buy beer. Flexible around my school schedule. I'm a DIY mechanic and have done basically all of my own work on all of my 7 cars, from doing brakes/wheel bearings to replacing an engine. The job wouldn't be anything like that though, described as just basic things. Oil changes, basic inspections, sweep up the shop, go on runs to the parts store if something was needed and couldn't be delivered, go on runs to pick up cars or drop off cars at an off-site shop, body shop usually, didn't do body work on site. Anyway, I'm there starting the job. I'm tasked with power washing the undersides of buses, big vans. The underside of a bus is a gross place, especially in northwestern Ohio. Thick grease, sludge, etc. I'm not complaining though. It's 90 degrees with 110% humidity and sunny outside. I'm sweating my balls off on the ground covered in grease, power washing the underside of the 3rd bus of the day probably. Hadn't really seen anybody, except one guy showing me how to use the power washer and such. Then, near the end of the day, I, drenched in sweat and water and grease, was approached by the manager who said something like, "You know, it seems like you're not really into the world. We really need someone motivated to get stuff done. And I totally get it if you don't want to do it anymore." I was like, "Da fuck?" I had like 5 minutes total of interaction with other people on my entire shift. I mostly just kept to my own business, power washing buses until my shift was over. I was pretty pissed, because I just did some of the most miserable work imaginable for hours, for like $40. Who would be enthusiastic about that kind of work? Anyway, I wasn't exactly fired, but I didn't return for the next day. Got a much better job at a help desk for police/court software stuff. Paid better, and I basically sat around the whole time, watching YouTube or reading, taking the occasional phone call. Next story. I was an electrician, and the one contractor I worked for hired anyone who could breathe when he needed extra help. One guy came in, worked a half day, and left saying he needed to go feed his cat. If the military counts, about a half dozen guys in my company got booted out during the first week of Navy boot camp for popping positive on their piss tests. My brother, Army, said during the first day he was in boot camp, a girl actually had a meltdown running around yelling that she couldn't handle this crap. They processed her out. Next story. I wasn't exactly fired on my first day, but the story kind of fits. I graduated a mechanical engineer back in August 2015. My country was, and still is, going through some economic crisis, and people were being fired much more than hired. But in December of the same year, I get a call. A company had found my resume and wanted to do an interview. Great! I traveled to be interviewed, and maybe 3 or 4 hours later, they call me to tell me I got the job. It wasn't a very good paying one. Terrible hours. 2 to 10:30 p.m. in a city close to the one I was living. But still, I had to take the subway to get back, and it would not be very safe. But hell, beggars can't be choosers. I was happy. They told me I'd start early January and sent me to the medical examination, sent me papers to open a bank account on their chosen bank to get my pay and all that. On January, I was told my would-be boss was on vacation. What? And I'd have to start later on, maybe March 1st. February passes by, and on the 28th, They told me there was some trouble they were fixing. On March 3rd, I was told the position I was hired for was no longer available. I was literally fired before my first day. They called me back a few weeks later for an interview for better position, better pay, better hours, and all that. They didn't even answer my emails after that. Didn't bother to tell me I wasn't hired again. Very professional company in HR. Next story. Went to an interview at a clothing store. Mostly athletic stuff. Let's call them Chair. So I show up to the interview, do the whole thing. Let them know I'll be on vacation soon, but I'm willing to work with them on that. I get a call later saying I'm hired and to come in to sign some stuff, and then I can start my shifts when I return from vacation. Awesome! So I return from vacation, give them a call, and they tell me a time to come in. I show up and they ask where my resume is. I told them I didn't bring one. They scolded me saying, always bring a resume to an interview. I was not aware this was an interview, since I've already signed forms saying I was hired. I do the whole interview and ask at the end about the forms. The manager who had hired me no longer works there, and apparently that means I no longer work there either. So I get a call to come in for my first real shift. Turns out it's an interview with another manager. So I'm sitting through this third interview after I've been told twice that I've been hired, and she says they'll give me a call. After a week, I follow up and am told, like I said before, if we need you, we'll call you. I haven't called you, so we don't need you. Please don't call again. So that's how I got hired and fired 3 times and wasted $60 on parking for the process. Next story. Obligatory, not me, but my friend told me his story. He got a job at this hippie burrito place. The place is veg and vegan friendly, and they make their own tortilla chips and salsa. It's that whole California surfer vibe. Anyways, he goes in to work the back kitchen, and they are training him. They tell him about the 2 different cooking stations so they can keep vegan tools and not mix them with the meat ones and such. I don't know the joke he made, but it was about vegans being lower on the food chain. That didn't sit well. So then they were going over their meal policy. You can get 1 free meal a shift, but the homemade chips you can just take. Doesn't matter. They make 2 kinds of chips, flour and corn, and mix them. This guy picked out most of the flour ones, since they were his favorite. They told him not to come back. Next story. This is honestly probably the stupidest thing that's ever happened to me. I got a job offer from a recruiting firm which mostly recruited for government positions. Most of those agencies the company hired for required their employees to be US citizens. What no one told me during the entire interview process, I think I had 3 interviews with them total, is that all of their employees also had to be US citizens. I am a Canadian citizen with permanent residency. Didn't find out till the first day when I was filling out all the new hire paperwork and handed the HR rep my green card as a form of ID. She goes, "Oh," but still doesn't say anything. I go back to my desk for several hours before my new boss calls me into her office to let me know that since I am not a US citizen, they would have to let me go. I asked her if that's the case, why didn't anyone mention it at any point before now? It's not as though I deliberately tried to hide it. It's never been a problem before now, and they didn't ask. All she could do was apologize. But basically the result was that they flat out could not hire me. The worst part? I actually had 2 different job offers on the table and took several days to make my decision, weighing the pros and cons. When I accepted this job, I subsequently turned down the other job. So not only did I lose out on this job due to multiple interviewers' incompetence, I actually lost out on 2. In hindsight, I kind of feel like I dodged a bullet on both, but that's a whole other story. Edit. I should have expected this. The other story isn't really anything all that special, but since a few people asked. The other job was with an apartment complex leasing office, a company a good friend of mine worked for, so he got me an in. He was working at a different location than I would have been, and the manager at the location I was looking at seemed really cool at first. But a while after I had turned that job down, they ended up working at the same location, and he said she was completely psycho. So, between a company that's so mismanaged that they can't even lay out their job requirements properly in an interview, and a job with a crazy manager, I'd say all in all, I would have rather had neither, and I'm happy with the company I ended up with afterwards. Next story. This was my first job as a 14-year-old. The manager of a local bagel place told me I could work a few days a week in the summer. I worked my full first day, cutting/toasting bagels all day. The owner came in at night to pick up the cash and told the manager that they didn't have the money to pay for a new employee. I was told not to come back. I do get free bagels from there though. The manager still remembers me, and it's been over 10 years. Next story. I worked in landscaping for 5 years. We had so many people quit on the first day, but only one guy ever got fired. He was with the mowing crew, so I didn't see this happen, but the foreman told me about it. One of the properties was this fairly large HOA, and he was told to use the weed eater around the trees near the entrance. It takes roughly 20 minutes to do everything up front, but the guy is gone for almost an hour. The foreman figures he's just taking his time on his first day, but when he went to check on him, he found him sleeping under a tree with the weed eater nowhere to be found. Turns out, the guy was high as balls and decided to just lay down for a nap. Thankfully, the weed eater was found near another tree, but the foreman told the dude he was fired and that he'd drive him back to his car. He declined and said he'd find his own way back. Next story. I wasn't the person, but I used to work at a hospital delivering food trays. One day, this new girl started. Very beautiful, very prim, very proper. She was apparently extremely rich, and her parents had forced her to get a regular people job to teach her the value of $1. I'm not sure if she had made some fiscally unwise choices or if it was just a parenting method or something, but there she was with us. This job wasn't really dirty or anything. I mean, hospital environments are somewhat unpleasant, but all we did, we put pre-made food into ovens and then serve it to people. Cleanup was pretty gross, but nothing extreme. Anyway, she couldn't believe that we had to handle food and push around these big carts. It was unfathomable to her. She thought it was putrid and difficult. She cried on the elevator on her way to deliver the first batch of food. I don't know if she quit or was fired, but I never saw her again. Next story. Actually fired someone after his first day work. Hired him as a driver. We went through the whole contract, salary, bonus, and so on. Gave him time to think about it. He was fine. Came to work the first day. Halfway through, started to complain his salary was too low. And he decided by himself it was fair to only come to work 2 times a week. Whole discussion because he had agreed the day before. Big mouth. Not even an apology or excuse. Decided he could not be trusted, and we let him go. We did pay him a week's salary though. Next story. I was 19 and in my own apartment with my girlfriend at the time and another couple. I was working at a mom and pop pizza joint, making crap pay. The owner was a raging asshole, and seen him send a few employees out of the restaurant crying. They quit while crying walking out. I was like, well, I'm going to look for another job. Looked online. Looks like a marketing company is hiring entry level. I called and got an interview. Wow, that was easy. I show up the next afternoon dressed to the nines, and there are 5 other people waiting there. They were vying for the same job. And here I am with no college, GED, and kind of dopey. I steel myself and say, just be confident and smart. They call me back and I sit down, ready to take whatever they throw at me. It is just a lady, and she says, Chris, wouldn't it be nice to be your own boss? I said, that sounds nice. And then she said, why don't you show up tomorrow at 8? I was like, sure, but I was kind of weirded out at how short the interview was, and I really had no idea what I would be doing. So, I didn't quit my job at the pizza place where verbal abuse because of his Italian temper is the norm. The next morning, everyone that was at that interview was there, and there was a group of people doing some sort of sale pep talk, and I was like, fuck, what is this? They instruct everyone to come outside in the freezing cold, and they start asking us, who can drive? And I flag one of the guys down, and he say, we are going to a grocery store and setting up outside and sell stuff. What stuff, you ask? I still don't know. I said, still thinking that might be a legit job. I still got to give 2 weeks at my old place. I wasn't even sure I got hired. And he said, we don't want to waste any more of your time, and shook my hand. I drove home feeling like a goddamn fool. I worked at the pizza place for about a year afterwards, and still consider it a positive experience. I made a lot of friends there. Next story. Not me, but I worked as a cook at a health foods grocery store. We hired this new cook, some lady who was probably in her 40s and claimed to have a ton of experience. So she came in on her first day and got out her recipes to prepare the items that were on her production list. One of the items required her to cook dry pasta. She approached my kitchen manager, who was a really cool guy, and asked, hey, how do you want me to cook this pasta? Already a very stupid question, but he replied, just cook it on the stove. Her, cook it on the stove? Kitchen manager, yeah. Her, how do you want me to do that? Kitchen manager, boil water in a pot and then add the pasta? Her, oh, how do you want me to do that? At this point, the kitchen manager just fills a pot with water and puts it on the stove for her. After doing this though, he went upstairs to our regional kitchen manager, Becky, and explained that the new cook didn't even appear to know how to boil water. Becky called down to the kitchen and asked the new cook to come upstairs to her office. Kitchen manager returns to the kitchen. Apparently, as soon as Becky asked this new cook about the situation, the new cook went into a rant about how the kitchen was unsafe, everyone was mean to her, and she had been keeping track of all health code violations that she'd seen. This was about an hour into her first day, and no one had spoken with her whatsoever except the kitchen manager and explaining to her how to boil water. Since it was in her first 30 days, she was still in a probationary period, so she was fired on the spot. New cook claimed to have tons of experience, didn't even know how to boil water, got called out by company brass, and tried to respond with thinly veiled threats about reporting us to the health department, among other things. All before her lunch break on her first day. Got fired on the spot. Next story. Not me, but a friend of a friend's. Got a job in marketing for a big corporate company. Moved across the country to start the new job. Spent the 3 days before starting work in a cocaine-filled partying bender. Called out sick on the first day, and then showed up 3 hours late on her second day. Yeah, they called her into the HR office as she was sitting at her desk, coloring in a coloring book. But she swears she doesn't know why she was let go, that they just couldn't handle her creative spirit. Next story. I was working through an employment agency, my second contract out of welding school. However, employment agencies tend to not know crap about welding. They call me Friday. Can you be at Door Welds for Monday at 7 a.m.? It's a 2-week contract, $18 per hour. Yes. What type of welding is it? MIG. Okay, great. I get there a half hour early. I was afraid of getting lost, bridges being up, that sort of thing, and sit outside with the other welders and smoke. I go in, do the safety thing, take a tour, and realize this is not MIG welding. I have to wear a respirator. I do not own one. This welding is really past my abilities, but everyone is really nice. This is a production welding job, which means they need someone who can work fast, not screw up, and has experience in all positions and can read complex blueprints with welding symbols. Yay, I got one! So I gear up. I bring my own jacket and gloves because I'm tiny. You always bring your own welding helmet, and I have a million random beanies that keep my hair from catching on fire. And he takes me and runs a few beads. So I run a few, and yeah, they're pretty good. He yells out to a few guys wandering by, looking at me, this tiny kind of guy kind of girl with a crap load of tattoos. Hey, watch your asses. She picked up a whip and gun 8 months ago and is better than half of you. Then he says I need a ventilator, and I notice the process is really different. It's not exactly MIG, which is GMAW, gas metal arc welding, which I'm qualified in. It's MCO, metal core arc welding, which I've never done before, but it's similar. So I get fitted for a respirator, and it's over 100 degrees in the coolest area, and that fucking sucks. So I stumble through the day. I'm too short to reach over the doors I'm welding, even if I stand on something, so I have to do it backhand, which isn't easy. The lighting sucks, and I know I'm in the goddamn dark, but good lighting does help. I'm in every position possible, and doing things I've never even attempted before. I'm fucked. Then the fucking respirator keeps coming unsealed, and I'm sweating, and people keep coming by to chat. I'm putting down good welds, but it's just taking so long, because I have no experience in this. I get along with everyone, and the tool guy keeps giving me free crap. I walked out with a respirator, like it would ever fit anyone else, a couple new lenses for my hood, a grinding mask, because it's way easier than setting your hood to grind, and some grinding wheels. Every time I walk by, he hands me something, and when I go to return it when everyone's packing up, he says it's mine. Sweet. So I go to the boss, hand him the key card. He says he'll call the employment agency. I get home. Half hour later, I get a call from the agency. They love you. You have so much potential, but they were looking for a journey person, someone who has completed an apprenticeship or has so many logged hours. But they'd love to have you if they have a position open for training. They thought you were great, but you couldn't go fast enough. The welds were great, better than others, but you need to do more. So I got paid for the day, and I got about $200 in free crap. And in most welding gigs I've had, you get paid breaks, no unpaid lunch. Next story. Not fired, but unable to continue. When I first came to London, I got stopped on the street by a chugger, charity mugger, the guys who work for charities asking for monthly donations on the street, who asked what I did. When I told him I was looking for work, he suggested I apply with that charity as it paid £8 an hour, a veritable fortune to a kid coming from the countryside. After a long interview process, myself and 2 others got positions and went onto the street the next day. In an 8-hour shift, I was sworn at, spat at, told to go die, and shoved out of the way by people on the street, and each time had to suck it up smile, and ask the next person, "Hi there, could I take a minute of your time?" One girl never came back from lunch, and I quit at the end of that first day. One girl stayed on for a while, more power to her. I just couldn't go through that kind of abuse day in, day out, even for an above minimum wage. I know they're annoying, and it's commonly thought these charities mismanage the donations and not enough goes back to the cause. But god damn, these chuggers are either kids who believe in the cause or desperately need money, and they're treated like utter scum. Just didn't have the emotional fortitude to take that kind of abuse all day. Next story. I didn't so much as get fired as immediately replaced. It's a somewhat complicated story, but I'll try and simplify it as best as I can. I was going to work for a computer tech company in a small town, excited for the opportunity through some connections. I interviewed with them the week prior to starting, as I was unemployed, and they were looking for some help. The first day I start, someone comes in with more hands-on experience than me and starts asking questions. They talk with her while I'm organizing various papers and such, and the next day, she comes back in uniform. Oddly enough for me, I was told I don't get a uniform until the probationary period was over. From there, I basically worked half days the rest of the week, while she stayed after me every single day. By Friday, I knew they weren't going to actually work me the agreed amount, nor would they keep me over her. So I just told them I'm not coming in anymore. A couple years later, I went and spoke with the owner of the company and told him how it was shitty I just stopped coming in. But he understood that it was a waste of my time to work not even 4 hours a day, and that the chick they hired only worked there for like 8 months. Seems like he made a mistake and said he would keep me on for a month, as if that would have made any better. I don't list this as a job I worked for, because quite frankly, it was cash in hand during the probationary period, and because the only thing I really learned from it is that no matter how enthused you might be about a new job, all it takes is one event to completely destroy that dream. It took me years to find another computer-related job. Next story. When I was very young, I had a period that I struggled with finding a decent job. It was during a recession, and as a 19 years old without training, it was hard times. I finally got an offer from a resort hotel to drive their delivery truck. Finally. I was down to a few dollars in my pocket, and it was in a beautiful area that I'd enjoyed in the past. Lots of skiing, hiking, and so forth in the area. The hotel was literally in the wilderness. The closest town was 30 miles away. I spent the last few dollars in my pocket getting there on a bus. I had to walk up to the hotel the last few miles because I couldn't afford the shuttle from the bus stop to the hotel. When I got there, I presented myself. I was immediately told that the position they hired me for was not available. Someone else, who turned out to be related to one of the managers, had been hired. They told me they'd find something for me to do though, so I was put up in a room with 6 other guys in bunk beds. They were all drug addicts. They stole everything of value I had in my bag within a few days. I went for a walk on one of the public, national park hiking trails. When I got back, I was severely reprimanded. The trails were strictly off limits to employees. I was stuck, waiting in my bed for something to do. No money to even buy a cup of coffee. I waited and waited. A week went by. They didn't give me anything. I presented myself to the managers a couple times a day to see if anything had come up, but nothing. They found me some work working the dishwashing line a couple evenings the second week. I had done similar work when I was 12. It's grisly. Then nothing again for a week. I was imprisoned, trapped, not a penny in my pocket. I was severely regretting my decision to go there by this point. I was getting fed 1 meal a day, the worst food you can imagine. Raw chicken, leftover stew, yes, from the guests' plates. We'd find toothpicks in it. It was inedible even when I was literally starving. After 3 weeks of this, I received a call from my parents. A really good company at home had called, and they had a job as an in-city delivery driver, a plum position, for me. But my parents told them no, not interested. He already has a job now. It broke my heart. I went straight to the manager's office and told them, "Give me work right now or I'm gone." They hemmed and hawed, and I quit on the spot. I went and stole my stuff back from my roommates, packed my duffel, and was walking towards the road when the assistant manager ran up to me and handed me a piece of paper. It was a note saying I owed the hotel $370 for the room and board for 3 weeks. No mention of the 2 nights of crap work I'd actually done. No mention of the promised job that was yanked from under my feet. No mention of the shitty food or shitty boarding house. I was starving. I lost 8 pounds. I hadn't slept in days. I had no friends. I was at the lowest point I'd ever been in my life, including the months I'd spent homeless. I literally broke. I started laughing, loudly and uncontrollably. I told them to, "Go ahead and bill me, you fucks. I'll be waiting for it," with a big psycho grin on my face. I was giggling and crying at the same time, unable to contain myself, acting crazy with a mix of hypoglycemia and depression fueling the fire. They got a, "Whoa, he's freaking out" look in their eyes and backed right off, and I walked away, still laughing. I walked down to the highway. It gave me a couple hours to get under control again. I hitched a ride for the first time in my life, got home 8 hours later. Things changed for me then. I got a job as a security guard within a week and decided to go back to school. The rest is history. I never heard another peep from them. I still owe them $370. It's a debt I would wear like a badge of honor on my chest if I could. Next story. Not quite the same, but we let someone go on their first day because they lied and somehow bullshit their way through our normally pretty good temp agency. We didn't have time to go through a full interview process, so we got the agency to send over the details of people who fit our criteria. Pretty much just know how to use a computer, knowledge of markup languages A+, but not necessary. And we just went with them. Figured if we were bad, we could just replace them, as they were temps. The work we were offering was, at its core, essentially just a short, intense period of data entry. 2 people, a couple of weeks of work tops. Good pay. No real specialist skills needed other than the aforementioned ability to use a computer. Likelihood of being kept on longer if they were really good. They send over 2 people. One fresh-faced young guy clearly fresh out of school, who was all right at the task, but was easily distracted by constantly talking or trying to talk to one of our, admittedly smoking hot, team members. Problem solved when we just moved his desk. The older lady they sent us as the second person, though, oh lord, 0 computer skills. Claimed on her resume to have years as a touch typist, web content developer, all sorts of experience with HTML and content management systems. Perfect on paper. Turns out she was just completely lying. Hunt and peck typing with her face inches from the keyboard. Turned her monitor on and off when trying to turn her computer on, and then forgot to turn her monitor back on again. Stared at me blankly when I asked her to open up the text editor, and had no idea what a tag was. Turned out she'd copied most of her resume from her daughter, and changed the dates to compensate for her being an older woman, so that it looked less suspicious. We asked her to leave at lunchtime, and requested the agency actually vet their candidates properly next time. Do some people seriously just think that job descriptions and requirements are a joke? I know some of them aren't technically required, and you can pick them up quick once on the job. But there's a difference between that and, I don't know how to turn my computer on. Next story. I got the call that I got the job, and should show up to fill out paperwork, and should be there at 1:30. I show up about 1:10 in my everyday trying to impress no one wear, good enough to be in public though. But even after I confirmed the 130 with the person on the phone, turns out it's a full training session and was supposed to be there 1 till 3. They tell me that I look homeless and that I need to leave. Had security escort me out. Next story. Not me, but my friend was head busser a breakfast restaurant and was training a new hire. It was one of those places that brings large, vase-sized containers of beverages, like water or soda. As they pass by the fountain drinks, my friend tells him, "By the way, you can take any soda, coffee, tea, whatever, for free." The new guy asks, "Really?" "Yeah, don't worry about it." They finish up the training, and my friend lets new guy on his own to do some easy stuff. Flash forward to a few minutes later. New guy is pouring himself a vase full of orange juice. If you haven't been in the restaurant business, OJ is one of the most expensive items to serve. The general manager, hothead, spots the new guy and curtly tells him, "You don't serve customers OJ in the vases." New guy responds, "Oh, this is for me," and starts drinking it. GM goes off on new guy. "Who told you that you can do that?" New guy points at friend. "He did." My friend kind of knew he was a little ambiguous when he told the guy about free drinks, but he was also staring down the barrel of an irate GM. Friend sputtered out, "I didn't tell him he could have free orange juice." GM turned to the new hire and made him the new fired. Next story. I worked for Nissan in a crap job, cleaning the floors when I was 18 or so. The bloke who was supposed to be showing me which areas to clean and what to do went for a smoke and left me standing there on the factory floor in full view of everyone, including the scary window guys, for at least half an hour. I didn't know what to do, so I just waited for him to come back. At one point, I heard someone say, "Look at that lazy cunt." I looked around, but couldn't see who they were talking about. I was let go at the end of the day, which was probably for the best, given that I work as a teacher now and wouldn't do that job if they paid me in BJ's. Next story. I was fired from Papa John's on my first day. Basically, they put me on the phone the first night. It was a very busy weekend night. I had barely any training, Just watched a few tutorials on the computer. I screwed up a few orders on the touchscreen system, forgetting items, not adding copings correctly, etc. The assistant manager pulled me aside and said things weren't working out and fired me. Earlier in the shift, she told me she was in school to be a teacher. Right before I stormed off, I told her she's going to be a terrible teacher. Next story. I was about to graduate from high school and looking for a job for the summer. I interviewed at this answering service place. I was offered the job in the interview with my boss asking me when I could start. I suggested a week from Monday, and she says something like, "What about next week?" I tell her I'm still in school Monday and Tuesday. Thursday is our class day and graduation rehearsal. Friday is my prom. Sunday is graduation. So then I can start Monday. She says, "Well, what about Wednesday? You don't have anything going on." So I'm saying, does she really want me to work just one day next week? And she insists, "Yeah, I want to get a jump start on your training." Okay, fine. I go in Wednesday. The place is miserable. It looks like the office from Joe versus the Volcano. Dark wood paneling on the walls, filthy carpet, flickering fluorescent lights. They had big bay windows with the blinds closed tight. None of the employees talked to each other. Everyone in the office looked like they were 10 minutes from suicide. I was not actually asked to do anything. I was just listening to my trainer's calls, and she's showing me how she's doing things in the computer. 5 o'clock rolls around and I'm sprinting for my car. My boss runs out to the parking lot to catch me. She says, "So I'll see you tomorrow at 8 a.m.? I tell her, "No, it's my class day and graduation rehearsal." She starts arguing with me, like, "Do you really have to go? Are you getting an award?" I say, "No, but if I don't go to the rehearsal, they won't let me walk in graduation." She's like, "Is it really that important to you to walk in your graduation?" I'm like, "Yeah, plus I have family coming from out of state just to see me graduate. So yeah." She like, "Fine, see you Friday then." I tell her, "No, Friday is my prom." She gives me an incredulous look and is like, "What time is your prom?" I tell her it's a 6:30, but I already have an appointment for my hair and nails, and we have to do pictures. And then I gently remind her that I told her all of this in the interview. She just gives me this disgusted look and says, "I don't think this is going to work out." I was actually pretty happy to hear that. Next story. Not me, but happened at work. I am an air traffic controller at a small airfield. A small twin-engine airplane took off, and I notices a trail behind it. I informed the pilot that he may have a fuel cap open. Common reason for a trail, as the wind speed siphons fuel out of the tank. He says he sees it and is returning to land. He lands, and I see that his engines are both smoking. I later hear that the mechanic that did maintenance of the plane was on his first day at the air taxi and did not tighten the bolts on the engine cylinder heads. As a result, it was rapidly loosing and burning oil. He was fired on the spot on his first day. Next story. Went to do help desk work for a job I was already overqualified for at a local college. Simple stuff. Remote troubleshooting, simple ad stuff, password resets. Jumped in needing only procedural training. I know 6 ways to do this. Which one do you want? Training was supposed to be 3 days with a senior employee, but I was handling issues 3 hours in. Handling them so well, in fact, that I cleared up the senior employee's backlog by lunch. I took a break, pulled out my phone, hopped on Reddit. Then the manager came up behind me and degraded me for not working, then fired me on the spot. Next story. Worked at a big car parts factory in my town for a grand total of 24 hours. The owners were Korean and fit the stereotype pretty well. For the first 2 hours, some Korean lady, who may have been my boss, I still don't know, kept trying to give me instructions. However, she spoke 0 English and I was unable to break that language barrier. About 8 hours passed and I got moved to the back line, which is a huge conveyor belt with tons of machines that make parts, and dropped the scrap metal onto the belts and up and out and exit on the other side. All is well at first, but then the belt stops. The owner of the company, who replaced the girl about 4 hours prior and spoke some English, but not very well, asked me and another guy to climb up and see what was blocking it. There was over 3 tons of scrap that had somehow compacted itself, and he wanted us to climb the very precarious outer wall. We're talking like 200 feet up with a 2-foot pathway with flimsy guardrails, and remove it by hand, without stopping the conveyor belt. I did it, but never went back. That's not worth minimum wage to me. Like 2 months later, they got hit with some huge safety violations for like over 10 million. Next story. Worked for Walmart for a single day. Went into my orientation, and they sat me in front of their computer-based training. They told me it would take me a few days to get through all of them, but I finished in a few hours. They told me to go home, and they'd call when I was on the schedule. A week went by with no call, so I went out and got a different and much better job. 2 months later, I come home from work to find a voicemail on the machine from the manager at Walmart, saying that I had missed 3 shifts, and if I missed another, they were going to let me go. Next story. Got fired my first day being a painter with my friend. I had bought paint and did the orientation by us painting my bedroom, in which the boss came and looked at and said, "Good work, ladies. You start tomorrow." The next day, he drives us to a huge house in the morning, informs us we will be painting the entire first floor, as well as the stairway and hallway upstairs. Tells us today to just start working on cutting in the edges around the walls/baseboards. Around noon, one of the seasoned painters, Rick, came by to give us a hand, since it was a big place, and he completed the cutting in of the edges in the huge dining room, and told us he would be back tomorrow at some point to continue helping. We completed almost all of the cut-in for the house. At the end of the day, even getting the residents to move things around so we had access, which they were happy to oblige. At the end of the day, we cleaned our paintbrushes, closed all the paint cans on the porch, said goodbye, and left. Unfortunately, we were told to leave the paint cans on the porch. The next morning, boss sends us a text saying we have the morning off, and he would call us around noon to let us know the deal. Also note, this text came about a half hour after we were supposed to start, and he was our ride. So we hang around, assuming maybe the family was away in the morning or something. Boss calls us around 3 p.m. and tells us we are fired because he got a call this morning that there is apparently paint all over their floors in every room of this house, and that the edging done in the dining room was horrendous. He told us he had gone over this morning and can confirm all the residents said, oh, and also that we didn't even wash our paintbrushes. So obviously, the family was cheap and didn't want to pay the whole fee, so they opened the cans and messed up the place. Looked like they needed new floors anyways. The fact that the paintbrushes were dirty just screams that they got all dirty overnight. Boss also had nothing to say when we mentioned that Rick was actually the one who painted the dining room. It wasn't even us, so they were clearly lying. He brushed it off, and it doubt even asked Rick. I get a text from this boss 2 weeks later, asking what I was doing and if I wanted to hang out. Like, fuck no. Next story. I was 15 at the time. Found a construction/labor job on the Craigslist Help Wanted. The job was for a small contracting company that was building a custom home and doing the landscaping for it. Being 15 and sharing a car with my brother, my dad took me to my interview, if you want to call it that. Basically told him how I grew up helping around the house, doing landscaping, stuff like that, which was what they were looking for. Paid really well for a high school summer job, something like $18 an hour. The guy told me I got the job and would start the next day. Just need to go buy some steel boots. Show up the next day with my boots and work my ass off the whole day. Spent most of the day digging a ditch for a water feature that was going to be gigantic once it was done. 4 o'clock rolls around and the manager walks up to me and asks how old I am. I tell him my age and he says I have to go because their insurance doesn't cover minors since it's construction. Turns out, during the hiring process, he didn't bother looking at my license for DOB. Assumed when I said I was a sophomore, I meant college, and somehow ignored the whole dad taking me to the interview portion. He finally had the realization during lunch when I was talking to one of the other guys about his son going to a rival school. Wasn't all a loss though. Gave me $250 cash for my time and the boot reimburse and gave me his business card to work for him once I turned 18. Did work for him 1 summer later when I was in college. Next story. On the first day of work, I showed up at 6:55 for my 7 o'clock shift with donuts for everyone. My boss immediately told me that all employees are required to arrive 15 minutes before the start of their shift, but couldn't clock in until their shift started, and that we're also required to clock out at closing, but stay until the place was closed. I told him it was illegal to make employees work for 20 to 30 minutes extra each day without being paid for it. He fired me on the spot for insubordination, probably because I said it in front of the other employees. I took my donuts with me too. Next story. I went in as a temp to do some financial analysis for a school. The next day, the temp agency called and said I don't need to go anymore. Apparently they thought I was too slow. To their credit, I was slow, but there was a reason for it. What they were doing was pulling data from 7 locations and through 10 styles of logging the data. So basically 70 vastly differently spreadsheets. So what the analysts there were doing was manually combining these data together, copy and paste, sorting and matching the data fields, and then running their reports. Well, I instead tried to set up a macro, what would have enabled them to combine all these data into one spreadsheet with a click of a button. So instead of spending days to prep the data for analysis, going forward, they could have just start their analysis on the very first day they get the data. Anyway, by the end of the day, I was about a quarter complete with setup, but I guess in their eyes, I didn't have any material deliverable. Now that I think about it, they had 4 analysts working on this task the first week of every month, and they were about to hire another one from the temp agency, so up to 5. If I were to complete my setup, I'd imagine that used to take 5 people a week to do would be cut done, to one person taking 30 minutes at most. I wonder if the person overseeing me, which was one of the analysts, realized what I was doing and was not happy about it. Next story. I have something for this. Back when I was in college, I applied to be a TA for my favorite class. It was for a relatively small class at a large university. The teacher had set it up so that the current TA could pick his or her successor from the current class for next semester's class. So I applied for the job. I studied up on all the material of the course. I researched what makes a good TA. I really wanted this position. Like I said, this was my favorite class. On top of that, the professor was a boss, and I wanted to continue building rapport with him to help me find a job or potentially get into grad school. I passed the hard requirement screening and get a chance to interview. I knew there were only a handful of people who had gotten to this point, so I was in the running. The interview with the current TA goes well. I answer pretty much all the questions well and managed to slip in a joke or two. This was on a Thursday afternoon. Sunday night rolls around, and because I was in college, I was inebriated. Not wasted, but probably drunk enough that I was probably talking funny. A little funny. Anyway, around 1 a.m. or so, Monday morning, I see that I received an email from the current TA. I open it, and it says, "Congratulations, Jet. Road, you got the job." I'm fucking stalked. I decided not to answer right away. For one, I don't want to risk making a typo or saying something stupid in the email. I also thought it would make me look more like a responsible adult to answer at 7 or 8 in the morning. So I go to bed giddy as a schoolgirl. When I wake up in the morning, I see I have another email from the TA. This was basically said, "Never mind, Jet Road. We're going with another candidate." What the heck? Not getting that job helped nudge me to making some changes in my life/career trajectory. It has mostly worked out okay, but I'm still salty about this. Next story. I got a job at a milk factory one summer during college. It wasn't the first day, but the third, so close enough. I played hockey the night before the third day, and wound up getting tangled up with another player and fell awkwardly to the ground, twisting my knee. I called the next day and said I could barely walk and was going to go get checked at the doctor to make sure everything was all right. They called me about 20 minutes later, informing me I had been let go. Next story. I got a job as a front desk agent at the Ritzy Est Hotel in my town. Was hired in March, and during the interview process, told them that I need 4 days off in June as I was getting married. They said all right and marked it down. Well, anyways, I get the call that I can start on Wednesday and went in to pick up my uniform and sign all my paperwork the day prior. When I got in to start my shift, they told me I wasn't going to get any time off for my wedding, and if that was a problem, I should just quit. Since they had already processed my paperwork and sent it to the government, it counted as a job that I quit and screwed me out of approximately $4,000 while I looked for another job. Wouldn't pay me as I technically quit and wasn't fired. I explained the whole situation to them, but the hotel I worked for vehemently denied that they said any of it. Next story. I came in for an interview at a repair shop and said that training started next day. Next 3 days, they had me doing a fuck ton of inventory and driving between all 5 stores to fix one device each place, and was not compensated for gas. Last day of training, he calls me saying, "Sorry, I talked to the manager of each store, and they don't have enough hours to give." Wow, way to waste my time. Basically just used me for free labor during the unpaid training and let me go. Next story. My dad's cousin has been fired from so many jobs, most within the first week, I think. He could fill this thread on his own, I bet. A couple of examples that I can recall. He was selling used cars and decided to use one to commute home. He literally just grabbed a car from the lot and drove it home. He had worked there a few days. He got a job delivering ice sculptures. He knocked one over and broke it. I'm pretty sure this was on his first day.